up, world? Established Rich coming right back at you. Today is one of those conversations that you don't rush. You don't yell through and you don't turn it into clickbait. This is heavy, this is sensitive, and this is real life. I want to be very clear from the start. This is not about celebrating a death. This is not about cheering for bad outcomes. And this is not about picking sides like it's a sport. A woman lost her life. A family lost a mother. Children lost their parent. That matters. But we also have to talk about why moments like this happen. Because if we don't, the same story plays again, just with a different name.
This morning, new details also emerging about the driver who was killed in Minneapolis. The New York Post reports Renee Good was part of a group of activists who worked to document and resist the federal immigration crackdown in Minnesota. Good, who did move to the city last year, linked up with the anti-ICE activists through her 6-year-old son's woke charter school, which boasts that it puts social justice first and prioritizes involving kids in political and social activism. It was through her involvement, the report goes on, in the school community that Good became involved in R.I.C.H, a loose coalition of activists dedicated to disrupting ICE raids in the sanctuary city. R.I.C.H and adjacent groups can also turn confrontational, with numerous instances of activists ramming agents with their cars in the past.
There's a part of me that feels very, very sad for this woman, not just because she lost her life, but because I think she is a victim of left-wing ideology. What young mother shows up and decides they're going to throw their car in front of ICE officers who are enforcing legitimate law? You've got to be a little brainwashed to get to that point to where you're willing not just to protest, that's fine, not peacefully protest, but throw your vehicle in front of legitimate law enforcement officers and drive your car into them. To get to that point, you have to be, I think, radicalized in a very, very sad way.
Those reports, Renee Good also worked with the National Lawyers Guild, a left-wing legal group that defends groups like Antifa.
Now, let me say this first because context matters. I am a former United States Marine. I've been in environments where split-second decisions are the difference between going home and not going home. When your adrenaline is high, when you feel threatened, when you don't know what the next move is, your body moves before your brain finishes talking. Anybody who has never been in that position does not get to speak with certainty about what they would have done. They can have an opinion, but they don't have authority. And that's important for what we're about to discuss. This incident in Minneapolis is one of those cases where multiple things can be right at the same time. A woman did not deserve to die, and a situation escalated in real time because of choices. Those two statements don't cancel each other out. Now, let's walk through what happened without emotion distorting the timeline. This was a protest involving federal officers. The streets were blocked, tensions were high, people were recording, people were shouting, and in the middle of that, Renee Nicole Good was in her SUV with her dog in the backseat. Her partner was on the outside of the vehicle, recording and confronting ICE officers. From the video, Renee does not appear aggressive with her words. She says she is not mad and she speaks calmly. But here is where reality shifts. Words do not override actions when vehicles are involved. A vehicle is not a neutral object in a confrontation. It is weight, it is momentum, it is unpredictable. When an officer tells you to exit a vehicle and you don't, it is no longer a discussion. You are in a command situation. And this is where a lot of people lose the plot. You don't have to agree with law enforcement to understand how they are trained. Their training does not start with, let's see how this feels. It starts with control the scene. Once a vehicle moves against instruction, that scene is no longer controlled. And when you add icy conditions, crowd dynamics, and people shouting from multiple directions, you have a recipe for panic on both sides. This is not a movie. There is no slow motion. There is no pause button. There is no narrator telling you what's next. There is only what you think is about to happen and what you do next. When the vehicle moved, an officer was struck. At that moment, the situation changed entirely. From that moment forward, everything became about a perceived threat. And people can argue about fear, intent, and alternatives. But intent does not matter when something already went wrong. This is where a lot of online commentary loses credibility because people are speaking from the comfort of their couch. They say what should have happened as if time was moving in slow motion. But real life don't operate on hindsight. Now, let me say this clearly because I don't want my words twisted. I do not believe this woman deserved to die. Not for a protest, not for blocking a street, not for being passionate. None of that carries a death sentence. But I also have to say something uncomfortable. When you do not follow direct law enforcement commands, you open the door to outcomes you cannot control. This is not an endorsement. This is a warning. We have all seen situations where people complied and still ended up hurt. That is real, that happens, and it is wrong. But this case is not that scenario. This is a moment where escalation came from movement, not silence. And I want people to sit with that before they turn this into a slogan. Now, here's a question nobody is asking. What drove her to be there in the first place? She had a 6-year-old son. She had other children. She had responsibilities. Yet, she was at a protest confronting federal officers in freezing conditions. That don't make her evil, but it does make me curious. Where did that fire come from? Who fed it? What content? What rhetoric? What online spaces turned this into a moment worth risking everything? Because passion without strategy is dangerous. And I say that as someone who has seen it up close. When people are told that disruption is always heroic, they stop calculating the consequences. And when consequences show up, everybody acts surprised. This is not about silence and protest. This is about understanding where protests end and personal risks begin. And if we don't have honest conversations about that line, more people will cross it without realizing what's on the other side. Now, let's stay right here, because this is where most conversations go off the rails. After the footage hit the internet, everybody suddenly became a use of force expert, a constitutional scholar, and a body cam analyst all at the same time. And that's when the story stopped being about a human being and started being about a battleground. One side says this was a cold-blooded act. The other side says this was completely justified. But here's the problem. Both sides are arguing from a place of identity, not a place of process. And when you argue from identity, you stop listening. Let me explain something very plainly. Law enforcement does not operate on intent. They operate on behavior. The courts do not ask what you meant. They ask what you did. That don't make it moral. That don't make it fair. But it does make it real. When a vehicle moves during a confrontation, the officer don't have time to debate whether you're scared, confused, or trying to leave peacefully. All they know is their body is in the path of something that could kill them. And I need people to understand this without thinking I'm defending death. This is about how systems function, not how we wish they would function. Now, let's talk about the commentary that followed. Stephen A. Smith made people uncomfortable because he said the action was legally justified while also saying the force was unnecessary.
At some point in time, you got to ask yourself, what damn country do you want to live in? At some point in time, we're going to have to ask ourselves that question. And I think the time is sooner than later. Because again, from a legal perspective, don't expect this ICE officer to be prosecuted. I'm telling you right now. She was in the car, Renee Nicole Good, 37 years of age, protesting, blocking off the streets. ICE wanted her to move. An officer got in front of the car. Another officer got to the side of the car, and then she tried to take off. And in their eyes, the Christy Nomes of the world for the Department of Homeland Security, and other folks on the right are saying, yo, they consider it an act of domestic terrorism because she tried to run over an ICE officer.
People heard that and lost their damn mind. Legal justification does not mean moral satisfaction. It means within the current structure, the system is unlikely to punish. And that distinction is something our culture struggles with. We want justice to feel good, but the law don't care about your feelings. It cares about procedure, commands given, actions taken, and perceived threats. And if you don't like that, the answer is not screaming at the video. The answer is changing the structure. Now, here's the part that really matters to me. Why are we still pretending that protesting in the face of armed authority don't come with a risk? Who is telling these people that this is safe? Who is selling courage without warning labels? Because courage without calculation is how families get broken. And I'm not talking down to nobody. I'm talking as a man who has seen what happens when confidence outruns reality. This woman was not a monster. She was not a criminal mastermind, and she was not looking to die. She was a person who believed that her presence mattered more than the danger. And that belief did not come from nowhere. Social media has turned protests into performance. It has turned resistance into content. And it has convinced people that if they don't show up physically, then they cowards. That is a lie. There are 1,000 ways to fight injustice that don't involve putting your body in front of a moving system that does not care about your story. And this is why I want my audience to really hear me. You do not win against the state by daredevil moments. You win with strategy. You win with law. You win with organization. Every movement that ever won understood that. They didn't mistake sacrifice for spontaneity. Now, let's talk about the family. The 6-year-old. That's the part that sits in my chest. Not the arguments, not the headlines, not the takes. The child. A child who will never hear their mother's voice again. And that is why we have to be careful with how we talk about this. Because you can acknowledge a bad decision without stripping someone of their humanity. You can say this didn't need to happen without lying about why it did. The world is not black and white. It's not cause and effect. And when we refuse to talk about effect, we guarantee a repeat. Listen, every tragedy creates two temptations. The first one is to simplify. The second one is to pick a side and stop thinking. And if we do either, we miss the entire point of why this story matters. A woman is dead. A family is broken. An agent has to deal with a decision he made in seconds that's gonna follow him for the rest of his life. None of that is a win. Not for protesters, not for law enforcement, and not for the country. And that's the part that gets lost when everything becomes content. I want to say this very clearly. You can believe that a person should not have died and still acknowledge that their actions contributed to the outcome. Those two things can exist at the same time. This is not about who deserved what. This is about cause and consequence. When you disobey direct commands from armed authority, you are no longer in a moral debate. You are in a survival moment. And I wish somebody would say that louder online, because too many people are encouraging others to play the hero without explaining the consequences. Social media don't attend funerals. Social media don't raise children. Social media don't live with regret. It moves right on to the next story. And this is why I question where her passion came from. Not to judge it, but to understand it. Who told her this was the way? Who made her feel like this moment required her body instead of her voice? Who benefits when regular people become symbols in somebody else's fight? Because here's the truth that makes most people uncomfortable. Systems don't change when you charge at them head on without a plan. They crush you, write a report, and move on. Real change is slow. Real change is boring. Real change requires patience, lawyers, policies, and discipline. It don't come from adrenaline. Nobody gets to decide how they think they would act if their life was at risk. You don't rise to your ideals in that moment. You fall to your training. And that is true on both sides. This story is not about justifying the death. It's about understanding reality so we stop feeding people fantasies that get them killed. Because if the message after this is just be angry, then the next person will walk into the same fire believing they different. They are not. The system don't know you. The system don't love you. And the system don't pause for your intentions. And until we teach that honestly, we are failing people by telling them half the truth. I don't think this woman woke up thinking, today is the last day. I believe she thought she was doing the right thing. And that's what makes this so painful. Good intentions don't protect you from bad outcomes. They never have. If we really care about life, about families, about preventing this from happening again, then we have to talk about behavior just as much as belief. We have to teach people when to push and when to pull back. We have to stop romanticizing moments that end with GoFundMes and candlelight vigils. That is not an honor. That's a tragedy disguised as a purpose. And my heart goes out to that child who will grow up with questions that no adult will ever be able to answer. That's the real cost. Not the arguments, not the clips, not the takes, the empty seat. But hey, that's just my opinion. What's yours? Like, comment, subscribe. Establish Rich. I'll be back with another one. Peace.